When you think of the concept of death, there are probably a number of things that come to mind. Chances are most of them are nothing positive. Perhaps a tall dark figure as Scythe, or one of the riders of the Four Horsemen. The way the embodiment of this concept is presented in fiction and other sources such as religion and folklore often support this idea. However, the version we're going to be analysing today well and truly bucks that trend.
There's this thing they have in French, l'esprit d'escalier, the spirit of the stairway. I don't think we have a word for it in English. It means, well, the clever things to say that you only think to yourself when you're on the way out. All the cool stuff you wish you'd said at the time. So I'm walking down the stairs, thinking, firstly, there's no such person as death. Second, Death's a tall guy with a bone face, like a skeletal monk, with a scythe and an hourglass and a big white horse, and a penchant for playing chess with Scandinavians. Third, he doesn't exist either.
What you just listened to is a clip from a fan-made adaptation of Death: The High Cost of Living. The comic in question is a 3-issue miniseries. It's one of the 2 spin-offs written by Neil Gaiman, centred around the character Death of the Endless, that first appeared in issue 8 of his comic book series Sandman. The video is available in full to watch on the Russian Comic Book Geek YouTube channel. I'd highly recommend it as a good way to try the graphic novel if anything mentioned in this piece interests you. What is it about this particular version of Death that holds my interest, unlike so many other attempts at the same concept? I think it has a lot to do with Neil's clever introduction to the character, and the way he slowly adds to it in greater detail as the story continues. For this explanation, I'll be pulling from many stories, and I'll do my best to explain it in a way that's clear and cohesive. I'll be using the audio dramatisation on Audible where applicable. The first volume of Sandman, entitled Preludes Nocturnes, collects the first 8 issues and introduces us to many things about the protagonist's dream. However, the main focus is Dream reclaiming his tools after a long imprisonment at the hands of a cult of mortals and his subsequent retribution. We learn the members of this cult express their desire to capture Death and in the process bargain for immortality. At this point in the story, unless you've been spoiled beforehand like yours truly over here, you should be thinking along the lines of your average reaper. This is backed up by Dream's response when he confronts his captor at the end of the first issue, Sleep of the Just. The way Dream describes Death here gives us a lot to unpack about Neil's intentions. But first, I'm going to show you the clip from the Sandman Audible adaptation.
You wanted Death? Then count yourself lucky for the sake of your species and your petty planet that you did not succeed. That instead you snared Death's younger brother. You'll never know how lucky you were.
Notice how Gaiman paints a very different picture here to the character we meet at the end of the volume in Sound of Her Wings. Dream's description builds a false image in the audience's mind, the picture of a creature that would purge humankind in an instant as an act of reprisal. It's also of note that Dream describes himself as Death's younger brother. This is because Neil wanted to create an image of a terrifying older brother to play with the innate sexism of language, as he puts it in an interview. It also feeds into the idea that this character is something to be feared. Neil displays in later works, such as the earlier clip from High Cost of Living, he is very much aware of the perceptions people have of the character he is creating and plans to introduce to us later. This false image is also added to when in the story 24 Hours we are given a horrifying display of what a single one of Dream's tools can do when they fall into the wrong hands. Bear in mind, this tool is one of 3 that holds his power. So the audience must be thinking, if a single one of the Dream Lord's tools are capable of such things, then what would all of Death's tools combined be capable of? So, there is this idea built up over the course of the first volume that the incarnation of death Dream is speaking of must be horrifying. So, I want you to put yourself in this mindset. You've just finished reading Dream's conflict with Dr. Destiny. Yes, that Dr. Destiny from 24 Hours is the same dude from Justice League Dark. Anyway, you turn over the page to read the final issue of the volume, and this is what greets you. The sound of her wings. This issue, I like to liken to The Wizard of Oz. You finally see the woman behind the curtain, so to speak. Now, bearing in mind everything I've told you up to this point, I'm going to let you hear her opening words from the audible version.
I said, what are you doing?
Feeding the pigeons.
You do that too much, you know what you get. Fat pigeons! That's a line from Mary Poppins. Love that movie. You ever seen it?
No.
There's this guy who's utterly a banker, and he doesn't have time for his family or for living or anything. And Mary Poppins, she comes down from the clouds and she shows him what's important. Fun, flying kites, all that stuff. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
What?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Look, Mama! They fly away when I run by.
Utterly fantabulous word, huh? It means, great, wonderful, ginchy, gnarly, peachy keen. It's a cute movie. Maybe not everybody's thing, but
As you can see, less skull-faced nightmare and more kind hand to help you on the way. In fact, I'd argue Neil's version of the personification is probably the closest to the concept of the Great Leveler. As with every person she meets, she tends to treat them equally, regardless of past transgressions. Actually, the only time I think we see her close to Dream's description is in the few occasions she has a rant at someone. Even then, it's less hellfire and brimstone and more a smack on the hand for taking too many cookies out the cookie jar. Or a breadstick to the noggin if you're unfortunate enough to be Dream. Honestly, that is the most violent this character is throughout the series, which is a massive contrast to the likes of Mitchell Wincott's death from Darksiders 2 that cuts down massive titans and armies in droves. Hell, there is only one official piece of artwork with her with a scythe. Even then, it's non-canonical because it's a bonus image at the back of the trade paper. So, that's it. That's all she wrote, so to speak. Well, no, because there's still one last tale from the Sandman I want to introduce you to before we end off. This tale is A Winter's Tale, and I think it will nicely punctuate why this character is so interesting. The story in this issue tells us what death was like before the events of Sandman and Sandman Overture. It tells us that over time she grew resentful and bitter, until one day she met a little girl. She said the following: "How would you like it?" Just those 5 words and a moment of self-reflection was all it took to create the version of death we see in Sound of Her Wings. It also makes things such as Dream's dialogue from Sleep of the Just make a lot more sense. I hope the information that I've laid out today gives you something to think about, and perhaps might have piqued your interest in this incredibly written series. All the materials used in the making of this video will be listed in the credits.